Today, we're going to be ranking the top 24 Dynasty running backs, and this will include the 2025 rookies. We'll be putting them in tiers as well, and this analysis is based off the film evaluation and the advanced stats. We crossed the bridge here at FTR, and with that being said, our first overall player in Tier 1 is going to be Bijan Robinson. Now, I have Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs both in that Tier 1. The reason I have Robinson just a little bit higher than Gibbs is I think he's going to be able to sustain his success for longer. He's 5'11", 215 pounds versus Gibbs, 5'9", 202. So Bijan is more that typical workhorse where I like to bet on. Gibbs is a great player, but he's typically the 12 to 15 touch per game guy, where Bijan is 20 plus, and I just like that floor that's a little bit safer. Both are phenomenal in the pass catching game. Gibbs is very explosive. Bijan is very explosive. They both do everything extremely well. I think Bijan is just a little bit more well-rounded, even though Gibbs technically has produced him from a fantasy point perspective in the first 2 years. Just from turning on the film, I think Bijan is the better player overall, just by a little bit. Now, Tier 2, we are going to have Ashton Jeanty, the 2025 rookie, and a lot of people are going to say this is too high, but when you go down the list, I mean, we'll just start listing out other names now. Tier 2 has Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall at 5, Achane at 6, and that's it. I wouldn't take any of those guys over Ashton Jeanty, especially when you're factoring in the age. Jeanty is only 21 years old, and running backs have the shortest lifespan of any position. That's why I don't like drafting running backs in startups. That's why I don't like trading for running backs until they are the very last piece to contend on my team. But Jeanty, he's a phenomenal player. I will say, because I have Ted McMillan, I think he's a special prospect. Ahead of him in my 2025 Dynasty rookie rankings, I'm seen as a Jeanty hater, but absolutely not. Jeanty is ridiculous. I mean, he's explosive, 36 explosive runs. Contact balance is unbelievable. 152 missed tackles in a college season is just nuts. The main knock against him is the receiving grade, and that's kind of something that I still don't think he is elite at, despite what the PFF grade says. 2024, it was 51.1. Simply, even I understand that that's just because they didn't feature him. You go back a year, the grade was 91.1, which is by far elite. I think that he's going to be a very good pass catcher, but a lot of the film I see is kind of dump offs. I just think his route tree is less limited or more limited than Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think he can get to that ceiling, but I think he could be like a Bijan Robinson type pass catcher in the NFL, which is still extremely good. Now we'll talk about Saquon Barkley here at 4. He's 28. I think we all know how good Saquon is, so I don't think I have to sell you on his film, but he would be higher. Age is very important for Dynasty. We look into 3-year windows. That said, Saquon next year, the year after, will be productive, even if he's probably not going to be able to repeat his 2,000-yard season like he did in 2024. Now, Breece Hall at 5 is a player that I don't really love. He's 5'11", 215 pounds. I think that his stature is going to hold up similar to Bijan, and he's only 23 years old, so a lot to love with the profile there. However, 2024 was simply not a good year. 68.7 rushing grade, 47.5 receiving grade. I will say, when I went back and watched the film, it looked a lot better than that, so I'm not really sure where that came from, but it probably came from the fact that he only had 26 explosive runs, 36 missed tackles. You'd like either one of those to be a little bit higher in, specializing in one department. The thing is, he's produced every single year, 16.4, 17.1, 15.1 points per game. So I have to take the stats and advanced data into account, but at some point, I also want to make sure I'm incorporating actual fantasy points scored into this, rankings list. That said, him and Achane at 6, I'm going back and forth. Again, this is why they're a tier. I think you could rank Achane higher than Breece Hall. In fact, I might do so myself in the next few weeks. But Achane here, he is the explosive guy. I mean, rushing grade, 82.8 last year, 80.5 receiving grade, and that's the main thing I like about Achane. He is an extremely good pass catcher, and as a smaller back, that's something you'd want to see. It's not just jump offs either. When you turn on the film, he gets used deep down the field, whether that's wheel routes. Time and time again, the Dolphins will utilize him. He'll get used in 5 wide sets very frequently with Mike McDaniels. There's clearly a plan to get Achane the ball, and he's clearly a special player with the ball in his hand, and that combination will get you fantasy points, and it's done so, scoring 17 points per game in both 2023 and 2024. Now, Tier 3, we're going to have a lot of these 2025 rookies, and I think having these guys in the top 10 already shows how low this class really is. For me, it's going to be my RB2 in the class, TreVeyon Henderson. If you want to have Omarion Hampton, who I have at 8, I'm fine with that. But Henderson, I'm just super high on. 5'10", 202 pounds. He kind of gives you the Jahmyr Gibbs mold where he's not going to give you 20 touches a game like a Bijan, like a Breece Hall, but he is going to give you those 12, 15 touches where he'll probably break out a 40, 50-yard gain, per game and have that explosive nature. We saw it time and time again, especially out of the backfield. He is an elite pass catcher, has great hands, good in pass protection as well, so he can get on the field at third downs, which at Ohio State frequently resulted in dump-offs. Going to be very interesting where he lands in the NFL draft. But even just raw rushing grade, I think he definitely has some patience concerns where, he doesn't wait for a hole to open up as much. But rushing grade was 91.8. You can't ask for much more than that. 29 explosive runs in college. Only had 37 missed tackles, which isn't fantastic. But again, the explosive runs, the big plays is Henderson's game. Hampton I have at 8, and he is 6 foot, 221 pounds. So he is that bell cow. He is that bigger size. The issue I have with Hampton is I don't think he's a very good receiver, to be honest. PFF kind of backs out with a 65.4 receiving grade. However, they do totally agree that he is elite on the ground. 90.5 rushing grade, 45 explosive runs, 73 missed tackles, and I'm kind of surprised to see the explosive runs at 45 because, and I think that is because Hampton obviously had more snaps than Henderson because Henderson was sharing the backfield with Judkins, another fantastic prospect. So the overall numbers are a little skewed, but I don't think Hampton is as explosive as Henderson, and that's, Henderson is very explosive. That's not necessarily a knock towards Hampton. I just didn't see it in that department. The receiving game as well, I don't think is a 0, but he's probably just going to be the guy that doesn't have brick hands, but you can only really rely on him to maybe check the ball down on third down. Maybe he'll get 30, 40 receptions a year. 50 if you're really pushing it, I think is kind of a ceiling. So that's kind of the issue I have with him. Then at 9, we have a proven guy in Jonathan Taylor. He's had a very up and down career, but at the end of the day, I was kind of surprised points per game. Only he went from 13.3 to 15.6 to 17.6 last year. The consistency last year was not there. But let's remember, Taylor, he's 26 years old, so that's a little concerning. He's a 5'10", 226 back. That was an elite prospect coming out of college. He's been very productive in the NFL. He was a consensus number 1 pick in fantasy at one point. Had a poor PFF grade last year, 63.9. 36.9 in the receiving grade, so that's also why I have him down here. He's not a very, good pass catcher. He's the guy, I kind of see him similar to Hampton, where you'll dump the ball off to him. He's good with the ball in his hands, but you're not going to have him run very far down the field. He doesn't have that kind of route tree like a Achane, like a TreVeyon Henderson might. Now, Tier 4, we're going to have Kyren Williams, and I'll be honest, a lot of people just don't like Kyren Williams. They say he's inefficient, he's not good, it's over for him. I get all that, and Tier 4, I honestly kind of want to just read this out because I'm slightly higher than Kyren than most, but I also kind of want to push him down. So I have Kyren at 10, I have Bucky at 11, Bucky Irving, James Cook at 12, Josh Jacobs at 13, Caleb Johnson at 14, Quinton Judkins at 15, all one big tier. I think if you really want to nitpick, you could probably cut the first tier at Josh Jacobs just based on youth. And, Josh Jacobs is not that. He's 27 years old and coming off a really big season, and he's taken so many carries in the past. Bucky Irving, I just don't know if the Buccaneers are going to commit to him. That's kind of my question. I thought the film looked really good, though. 89 rushing grade, 90.3 receiving grade. I struggle to see the receiving upside as much as most. I didn't really see the, give him the ball deep down the field. I thought he was good, again, with the ball in space. But the smaller backs, the guys that get 12 to 15 touches a game, I'm a little worried about it. And I don't know what the plans with Rachaad White. I think Sean Tucker is a talented player, and he might have a role next year. The Buccaneers offense with Liam Cohen gone, I don't know what that's going to look like, because the one thing I will say about Bucky is he looked great, but I thought he was schemed up to succeed very well. He made the right plays, don't get me wrong, but I thought he was put in the right place to succeed time and time again. And I'm just a little scared that without Liam Cohen there, that might not be the same opportunity. With Kyren, though, the red flag for him is he wasn't very efficient. He didn't really show much explosiveness. Only 27, explosive runs last year, but he did have 50 missed tackles. And I think that he's a guy that's so good on third down. He can make a man miss, and he's so dominant on the goal lines. With how important touchdowns are for fantasy, I always see him having a role. I think the Rams are going to be a good offense, and that's why I think that his floor is high. Even if Blake Corum does come in, he just does so many things that are translatable to fantasy. Get on the field at third down. He'll get those dump offs. Be used in the goal line. He'll get those touchdowns. I just don't see the fall off. I feel like so many people think Kyron's going to fall off a cliff any day now, and Blake Corum is going to be the clear RB1. I just don't see that with Kyren. I think his floor is much higher than most do. Let's jump to 12, where we have James Cook, who's honestly being kind of disrespected in the community right now. He's improved year over year. When I watch his 2023 tape, when I watch those games of his last year to 2024, it's a lot better. He's just a lot more of a overall better runner, offers some good receiving capability, and is very good around the goal line. He plays for the Bills with Josh Allen. The offense is something I want to be connected to. Those touchdowns will continue to pile in, and the fantasy points have backed that improvement. 2023, 13.7 points per game. 2024, 16.7. I think that he's a top 12 back at only 25 years old. You're going to get 2, probably 3 years of really good production out of him, and you can just feel confident. Jacobs at 13. I think you guys know how good he is. I don't really need to talk about it, but after a dip in 2023 of 13.9 points per game, had a bounce back 2024, 17.2, and he's just a guy that'll run you over. 67 missed tackles in that Packers offense. He's a big body. Not a very good receiver, but honestly, his receiving grade was pretty high this year in comparative to what I expected it to be. So I have to give him his respect for that. But Caleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins are going to round out the tier. Caleb Johnson is kind of the similar concern I have with Hampton, but I think he's even less explosive. He's just a guy that I think will be a very good runner, but I think once you get to the NFL, he will be strictly first and second down, will not get on the field for pass catching opportunities. 65.2 receiving grade. He makes men miss, though. 66 missed tackles. That's phenomenal. He's going to be very landing spot dependent, because if he goes to a good offense, I think he could flourish. But if you get stuck with, let's say the Raiders, and they're pretty bad, he's getting 1,000 yards. I see him becoming that Najee Harris from 2024, where he's picking up yards on the ground, but it's kind of the dirty work that doesn't really give you too much fantasy points. The same can kind of be said for Quinshon Judkins. I do like him a bit more. He had a 6.5 receiving grade, but I think that's kind of overrated or overhated. I think when given the opportunity, he can catch the ball. He just wasn't really used to it because Henderson was so clearly that third down back there that, he wasn't really prepared for those opportunities that he did have. It wasn't, in his flow, in his game at the time. But Ole Miss looked very explosive, only had 24 explosive runs in 2024, and I will say his Ohio State tape did not look nearly as good, but I think there's upside there. And what he does well is make men miss. 66 missed tackles. I mean, he is also phenomenal. I love Quinshon Judkins in that department. Very landing spot dependent. We will go and update these after the NFL draft. So if you guys want to see that, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys back then. But tier 5, let's get back to the video. We are going to have Chuba Hubbard at 16, Kenneth Walker at 17, Derrick Henry at 18, Christian McCaffrey at 19, and Chase Brown at 20. So a lot of older backs here for the most part. Chuba Hubbard not really fitting that mold. And he's a guy that I really wanted to be higher on. It's just, I have so many questions about the Panthers. Is Bryce Young legit? What role is Rico Dowdle going to have? Is Jonathan Brooks going to be anything after this year? I don't know. But Chuba was so good last year, 16.1 points per game. Very good runner, even though he wasn't super explosive, even though he wasn't fantastic in the receiving game. Had 50 missed tackles, which is very impressive. I think that's kind of the back that he can be. 210 pounds, 6'1". He is a guy that I would feel comfortable giving 16 to 18 carries a year and not really worrying about it. It's just the uncertainty about his situation. But if you didn't have those questions, I would have him a tier higher than this. Kenneth Walker is an interesting case because he's here at 17, he's 24 years old, and he's a very good player. He finally made that jump to 16 points per game and also had a decent receiving year. I thought that he improved a lot because coming into the NFL, he really had no hands. That was just not part of his game. The thing I didn't like to see is 13 explosive runs. That should not be that low. His game should consist of a lot more than that, and he had 61 missed tackles. I don't really see how that is going to translate long term because Kenneth Walker in the past has been a guy that can break you off a 40, 50-yard run a game, and he can run guys over, but he has been a lot more explosive in prior years, and I didn't see it as much as I would have liked to in 2024. The other issue with Walker is when I watch Walker, I also watch Charbonnet, and Charbonnet is very good. You have questions about what this offense is going to look like. They're kind of blowing it up with DK Metcalf, so again, question about the situation, but I think the talent there is a bit higher than 17. Derrick Henry, kind of be a waste of breath to talk about him from a film perspective. The dude is a freak. He runs guys over. He's insane. He's also just 30 years old, so there's only so much longer that this can go on, which, I say that now, but that's what people are saying about LeBron James, so I think it's a little different for NFL running back, but still, I think you get the point. Christian McCaffrey at 19, he's a guy that I'm buying for contenders because it's so impossible to predict injuries. Didn't do anything in 2024. I get it, but 2023, let's go back. He was elite on the ground, 90.6 rushing grade. He had 60 missed tackles, 44 explosive runs. He is a guy that could win you your league. He's elite out of the backfield. He's just a weapon. He can make big plays. He can do the little things. He can do everything. Christian McCaffrey is one of the most complete backs in the NFL. The main concern I have for him is the age and the injury history. At 20, we have Chase Brown, who's a pretty good player, had 15.9 points per game in 2024, but you don't know what the Bengals are going to do. Typically, he has fifth-round draft capital that doesn't bode well for him. That being said, he looked pretty good last year. He's a better receiving back, 76.8 receiving grade, and I thought he looked like a good weapon, was used in a pretty diverse route tree with the Bengals last year on a good offense. My concern is they draft a running back over him to worst case scenario, he basically just becomes the change of pace back, is the pure backup, or what I think is more likely to happen is they'll draft like a Quinshon Judkins, and Brown will be the third down back exclusively, which isn't going to be terrible. Like, he could still be an RB2, maybe like a Dave Montgomery in terms of how fantasy productive he is, but I don't think that you'll get that 15.9, 15, 14 point per game season. I think you'll probably have a cap ceiling of 11, 12 points per game. Getting into tier 6, we have another rookie rounding this tier off in Cam Skattebo at 21. 2022, we are going to have Dave Montgomery, and 23, we are going to have Joe Mixon, with Alvin Kamara rounding it out at 24. So Skattebo is a guy that I really like a lot. Coming out of Arizona State, we didn't really hear much before this year, so that's not always a great sign of his prospect profile. But I think when watching the tape, the dude lights it up. He could go to a great spot. In fact, in a Dynasty rookie mock draft we recorded earlier, he went to the Chargers in the third round, which I would absolutely love. But he's a guy that can make a man miss. For his, as big as he is, I believe he's around he's 219. He can juke a guy out of his shoes. He can run a guy over. He is very creative in open space. Bottom line, he makes men miss. He had 103 missed tackles, And not all of those were just running people over. He had 38 explosive runs, not the best, and he doesn't really have a ton of long speed. I mean, he just got, the overall stat number is a little higher because he had so much volume. But still, that's like the concern I have is the long speed's not really there. He's not going to hit home runs. He's not the best athlete in the world, but he's a fantastic pass catcher. We'll see him get used out of the backfield. We'll see him get used, with the wheel route. We'll see him get used with those Texas routes. It happens time and time again. He's very diverse. I love him, especially because he provides pass catching upside for these PPR leagues. 22, we have Dave Montgomery, who very good last year, 15.8 points per game. The issue is he's 27. I think we know what he is. Ben Johnson potentially leaving could hurt them a little bit, so there's that. He's going to be a productive back, but I'm not sure how much longer, he can really produce in the Lions offense. Joe Mixon, also a great player. Don't really need to dive too much into him. He's 28 years old. The Texans are good. Had a 17.2 point per game season in 2024. And round this out with Alvin Kamara at 20, who is 29 years old and had an 18.9 point per game season. I mean, we know Alvin Kamara. He's an elite receiver. He showed that time and time again. And really, he benefited a lot, though, from checkdowns. I mean, how close those balls were to the line of scrimmage was kind of ridiculous. So I think that can continue, but I'm also not sure if he can really be used in the explosive nature, if he can be used deep down the field like he once, was in his prime younger self. That's going to wrap up the video, though. If you guys do enjoy, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. But I really want to know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. So please let me know, who did I have too high? Who did I have too low? Who is being disrespected? I love the debate. I will respond to every single one of your comments. Just leave it down there. But again, thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.